Before we start the episode, if the content of the show is something that has been resonating with you, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who you feel may need to hear it. This helps the show grow and helps us keep bringing this content out into the world. My guest today is John Davis. John has had one of the most detailed near-death experiences that I and a lot of other people have heard. He's been around the podcast circuit, so to speak, and it's always advertised. His story is always pitched as being one of the most detailed accounts of the afterlife that we have. And it was like he was given a tour of a realm that was very similar to an Earth-like realm, and we kind of explore the idea that it might just be that this realm he experienced wasn't necessarily the ultimate heaven, but an orientation area for souls who have newly crossed over. I'm very honored to have had him. Like I said, I've listened to him speak for the last few years. His energy is always very authentic, and he's upbeat and just such a nice guy. So I was slightly disappointed at the end of the interview when we lost signal for the last 4 minutes. So during the interview, his answer to the question that I ask everybody, what gives you hope in this day and age, and what kind of message can you give to the audience that would leave them with some hope? It was cut off, but I will recap that when that time comes. And so, John, if you're listening, I'm sorry that it has to be me recapping it, and I'll do the best I can to convey what you wanted to convey. But yeah, the following is my interview with John Davis, and I hope you enjoy. My guest today is John Davis. John, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Jake, thanks for inviting me. I always love to share my story, so thank you so much for the invitation.
Hey, I love to hear your story. Like I've said, I've heard it multiple times before, and the energy you bring when you tell it is always, well, like when I first met you, it's just, I feel it. I feel it already. I feel your enthusiasm for it. I feel the authenticity in it and how it must make you charged. So thank you. Like I said,
Every every
I'm a
every time I
fan.
share my story, it instantly puts me right back to that
Mhm.
day, and it was the pivotal day of my life that changed everything, and I love to share it. I love to bring that kind of hope to people because my experience brought me so much hope, and I
Mhm.
hope that will do that for your audience as well.
Well, that idea of bringing people hope was the whole point of me doing this podcast. That's why I called it One More Voice. I wanted to be one more voice feeding this collective, I guess, ascension or awakening to our true natures that seems to be going on. So, yeah, stories like yours are perfect for this. And I thought in the beginning, I'm like, I want to do a near-death experience podcast, like say Next Level Soul or the
Sure.
Jeff Mara podcast. It's turned into having more. There's a wider spectrum than that, but to have you on, I'm like, this. It's great to go directly to the near-death experience and to be talking to someone who I've heard the story, like I said, so many times before. So if you don't mind though, let's just go right to the day that you died, since your
Sure.
your your account is so much more detailed than most in the sense that there are so many things that are relatable to Earth life here. And
Yeah.
I might bring that up later, but I'm going to have you just tell your story first, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. Not a problem at all. Well, I'll tell you how this whole thing started. It began with really with my dad. My dad was in sales all of his career, and he won a sales contest. And he part of what he won were these two mopeds, or what we call scooters now. And we used to ride these things all over the neighborhood. Well, one day I was out riding and I had an accident and I slammed into a tree. In the way that I landed, I tore the tendons off my right hand and I had to go in to have surgery. Well, I was only 21 and I had never really been in a hospital that much. I never had surgery before. I didn't know what to expect. So we go to the hospital. My mom drives me down to the surgery and we're in the operating room. And when they start to give me the anesthesia, I had some kind of a horrible allergic reaction and it stopped my heart. And that's how this whole thing unfolded. And what I want to tell you and tell your audience to kind of give them a little bit of a background of a lot of times when we hear about a near death experience, we hear about somebody who had an accident and or they die on the operating table and they find themselves floating above their bodies. And then they become aware of a tunnel, and they start moving down this tunnel, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, as they're moving down the tunnel, they're met by somebody, a loved one, a family member, a friend who tells them it's not their time, they have to go back. Well, somehow, I don't know how they did this, but I didn't have any of that. They put me on the other side of the white light. And I think the reason was that so I could tell people what happens when they go into the light and not to be afraid of it. And that's where my whole story starts. So the second that I die, I open up my eyes and I am standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. Even to this day, I've never seen a building as beautiful as the one that I saw that day. It was incredibly long, just this huge, long building, this corridor building made of white marble. It was so long, I couldn't even see the end of it. And on the right-hand side of me were these tall marble columns, maybe 20 or 30 feet high, going all the way down as far as you could see, maybe 6 feet apart. And in the center of this building were tables, white marble tables about the size of somebody's average kitchen table, but it was made of marble. All the way down, as far as you could see, were these tables. Well, right about now, in my left ear, I heard, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." Well, I had never even heard that term before. I never even knew what a spirit guide was. But apparently, a spirit guide helps us plan our lifetimes before we come in to our life, and they stay with us for our entire lifetime. Well, what happened is he was telling me everything that I was seeing in my left ear. And he told me that where I was inside the orientation building. It's the first building people go to when they cross into the light. And he told me that, well, at every one of these tables, there were two people sitting at every one of these tables, again, as far down as you could see. And he told me these are orientation counselors. They help people after they finish a lifetime on earth, they help them back to heaven or what they call the other side. So he told me to look to my left, and I looked to my left, and what I saw was extraordinary. There were these tunnels. They looked like doorways, just like your average front door, a 90-degree angle, all these doorways. All these doors going down as far as you can see, about 6 feet apart from each other. And they looked like if you looked at these tunnels, it looked like looking into space. It was all black, and and my guide said, "Look at the next tunnel." So I looked up. There was a man, an elderly gentleman, who was coming through this tunnel. And he was doing this. He had his right hand over his heart like he had chest pain. And my guide said he just passed from a heart attack. So what happens is in this orientation building, this is where people come when they finish a lifetime. They come through these tunnels. And I didn't think to ask him, what are these? They weren't like wormholes, or I don't know what they are, but somehow they connect our lifetime with our home, which is the other side. Because Earth isn't it's not our home. We're just here temporarily. The other side is where we're really from. So here's what happened. As this man is coming through this tunnel, holding his chest, there was a woman sitting at this table. And my guide said these are called orientation counselors. Their whole job on the other side is help people remember where they're from. So she stands up. She walks over to this gentleman at the tunnel. She takes his hands in hers and leads him back to the table, and they sit down across from each other. And she started talking to him. But I couldn't hear what she was saying because I was too far away. But my guide said to watch him. So I'm watching him, and as this woman is talking to him, the most extraordinary things started happening. He began to change from a man in his 80s or 90s who had lived a long life on earth to a man in his 30s. And this happened right in front of me. And my guide said, everybody on the other side is in their 30s. And I didn't think to ask, why is that? But that's apparently how God created all of us. We're all young in our early 30s, and that's how we appear on the other side. So when somebody passes, when they've lived a long life like this gentleman, he ages down to the age of 30. And if someone dies young, like a 6-year-old has an accident and passes, when they get back, they age up to be in their 30s. And I thought that was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And this whole thing unfolds, and he's telling me everything I'm seeing in my left ear. So what happens is on the other side, everybody seems to have jobs or things that they love to do. And the people that were in this orientation center, they love to help people orientate back to the other side. The reason that they're there is most of us don't remember where we come from. We don't remember that we're from the other side, that we come to Earth to learn and to experience and to grow, and that when our lifetime is finished, we just go back home again. Well, most of us don't remember that. And many times when people pass, they get confused. And that's what these orientation counselors do. They help people to remember that they just finished their Earth life. Now they're back on the other side, and they help orientate them back to who they really are on the other side. So after this orientation takes place, this gentleman stands up, he walks off to the right, and he walks down 3 of these marble steps into what I call the gardens. I don't know if that's what they call it, but that's what I call it. It was this beautiful, beautiful gardens of green grass and flowers and trees and plants. Just absolutely gorgeous. It looked like the most perfect English manicured garden you've ever seen. And there were all these people. There must have been hundreds of people that were out there, and they were there waiting for this gentleman. Somehow, and I still don't understand how this works, but when somebody passes, when it's their time to go back, everybody knows when they're coming over. And I don't know how they do that, because none of the tables that I saw where these counselors were sitting, none of them had computers. There weren't any papers or anything. So I don't know how they know, but the counselors that were sitting across from that tunnel knew who this gentleman was and when he was going to come through, when he was going to pass. And somehow somebody told all those people that were waiting for him, he's going to be coming through soon. And what happens is all the people that we have loved or have known, friends, family, loved ones in our lifetime who passed before us, they all gather in those gardens waiting for people to come back. And this man, he was met by applause. People were hugging him, smiling, telling him he did a great job. He finished his life, and now he's back. And my guide said, people don't realize how big of a deal it is to come to Earth, because Earth is one of the hardest of all the planets to have a lifetime on. And he said, most of us are warriors and fighters who come here. That's why it's such a big deal when we get back, because it's really true. We really do feel like we've been in a battle when you come to an Earth life. And so it's a really big deal. We don't realize how many people are rooting for us on the other side when we're in a lifetime here. And it was just amazing to see that all these people were there, and not just all the people, but get this. Not only do people survive, but so do our animals. God created our animals with souls. So when you cross over and you've had pets in your lifetime, your pets are going to be there also waiting for you. I thought that was absolutely extraordinary, because like most of us, we've all had pets in our lives.
Yeah.
And they don't really die, just like people. Nobody really dies. So what happens is, as this whole thing starts to unfold, my guide takes me to these different places on the other side. And to this day, I still don't know exactly where I was, I just know that what it felt like at the time was, have you ever been on a college campus?
Yeah.
You know how colleges have like their buildings, here's your history building, your English building, your science building.
Yes.
That's kind of what it felt like, that I was on this campus where all these buildings were. And so what he did, he took me to these different places. He took me to the outside of what they looked like, and then we went on the inside. So after I watched this gentleman have his reunion, he took me to another building that looked white, beautiful white marble, this big gigantic rectangular building with white marble columns all on the outside. So we go on the inside, and he takes me to a room that is a round room. It would be like if we were to go to a movie theater, it was round, like a round room. And above me were all these movie screens, all in a circle around me. I could look up and I could look behind me, and everything I saw were these movie screens. And my guide said, "This is where we do the life review." And all of a sudden, every one of these screens lit up, and there must have been 12 or 15 of these screens, and it was like movies were playing about my life. They actually had recordings of me. One of the screens was me as a little child, another one was me as an infant, another one was me entering my first day of kindergarten. And these, every time I looked at any of the screens, it was a different aspect of my life that I had lived up to the age that I was at the time, which was 21. And what's so interesting is the life review, how it was explained to me, is the greatest teacher of the soul. And what that means is that when you watch these video screens above you of your life, you can feel how your actions affected others. And one thing that happened that I totally never thought anything about it. One of the screens was showing me as a kid in elementary school, and we were outside playing at recess. Well, we had a kid in our class, his name was Troy, and he had something like MS or Parkinson's. He couldn't walk without crutches. Well, one day he was out and he fell, and I ran up to him. I helped pick him up and helped him put his crutches back on. Well, I never thought anything about that. That's something that anybody would do. But when I was watching that, I could feel how much Troy appreciated that. And I had never thought anything about that. But that's a big deal to the other side. We don't even realize the things that we do that impact other people. At the same time, not only do you feel the good things, but you also feel if you hurt somebody, if you intentionally hurt somebody, you have to feel how your actions made that person feel. And that's why they call it the greatest education for the soul. That's how we learn. And the life review is probably the greatest vehicle to helping us learn and to grow, because we feel what other people felt. So that was the life review. And then we leave that building. He takes me to another building, again, a huge, long, sprawling, rectangular building with, it looked like white marble with columns all along the outside of it. And we go on the inside, and he takes me to a room that we would call today as a modern movie theater. And there was a screen up in the front of this room. And this was a part, Jake, about my experience that I had a really hard time with, because I was raised Catholic. My dad was very Catholic. We used to go to church 2 or 3 times a week, and then also on Sundays. So I grew up in the church. Well, in this building, my guide said, "I'm going to show you past lifetimes." And I didn't know what to think about that. And then all of a sudden, the screen lit up like they were playing a movie. But it was me. I didn't look like I look now. I looked different. But the first video that was playing was me. I was an older gentleman. I had a shaved head, and I had a red robe or some kind of a gown on. And this was in a monastery. And my job in that lifetime was to teach little kids how to be monks. And that life happened somewhere in Southeast Asia. And then the screen went blank, then it turned on again, and it was me again. But this time, it was in a different life. This was somewhere in Eastern Europe. I had a wheelbarrow, a wooden wheelbarrow full of shoes, just like people's shoes. And what I did in that life is I fixed people's shoes. And I was pushing this wheelbarrow on a cobblestone road. And that was my job in that life. And then that screen went blank. Then the last one showed up. And again, it was me again. And I was standing in a wooden boat. And I was either on a lake or at the ocean. And I had these nets, these fishing nets. And I was throwing them into the water and pulling them back out to try to catch fish for the village. That was my job in that life. And that life happened somewhere in the Middle East. And I had a hard time with this because that's not part of Catholicism. But what I realized was that our souls, we were all created eons and eons ago. We can have as many lifetimes as we want. And what I'll tell you later is that Earth is not the only planet. Earth is only one planet that we can have lifetimes on. So if we have been around for billions of years, of course we can have different lifetimes. And what my guide told me was that the reason that we come to a place like Earth and we leave the other side is for experiential learning. On the other side, or heaven, the afterlife, whatever people want to call it, they just happen to call it the other side. It's a perfect world. There's no war, there's no hunger, there's no disease, there's no poverty. It's a perfect world that God created for all of us for eternity. The only drawback is that on the other side, there's nothing to work through. And what I mean by that is there's no conflict. When you come into an earth life, things here are really tough. And we seem to learn the most when we go through something difficult. We never learn when everything is perfect. But when you come to an earth life, it's almost like all bets are off because we go through things. But that's what teaches us. It's the hard things that we go through that make us better, that teach us, that help us realize what we're really capable of. And that's the primary reason that we leave the other side and come to an earth life, is for learning. But again, it's not our home. The other side is our true home. So that was the past life. I just call it the past life building. I don't know if that's what they call it. So we leave that. He takes me to another building, shows me the outside. And this one was round, a perfectly round building. It was ginormous. I can't even explain how large these buildings really were. We have nothing like them here on Earth. The closest that I can think of is the pyramids in Egypt. But these buildings were much larger than that. So it's a round building, and it's got those beautiful white marble columns all in a circle, and it had a huge, gigantic dome on it. This beautiful domed building. And my guide said, "This is where we go when we plan a lifetime." So he takes me in. He walks me up to a table, again a beautiful white marble table, and on top of this table is sitting a scroll. It was a scroll that was rolled up with a blue ribbon around it. And the best way that I can describe it looked like Egyptian papyrus paper. Have you ever seen what that looks like?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
brown looking.
Yep.
And he told me that everything in our lifetime is planned. None of us are accidents. Our lives have a real purpose. And on the other side, we take these scrolls and we write down the major things that we want to experience and what we want to learn. So I took the blue ribbon off and I did this with the scroll. I unrolled it on the table.
Hmm.
And the first thing that I noticed as I was looking at the writing, it looked like calligraphy. It looked like the kind of writing where you have one of those ink pens, you dip it in the ink well, and you write really large.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like. And my guide said that all the major elements of a person's life are planned for. Things like who are your parents going to be? What country are you going to live in? What language are you going to learn? Are you going to go to a university? What kind of career are you going to pursue? Are you going to have kids? Are you going to get married? All these different things, the main elements of our life are planned for. So as I went to try to read what I had written, it folded up again, and I wasn't able to read what I had written. And I think the reason was because if I had known some of the things that I had planned to do in this lifetime, I may have done something different to interfere with that. So I wasn't able to read it. But he explained to me that these scrolls, they're almost like what people do when they plan New Year's resolutions. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have done that at the end of the year. They write down what they want to do for the next year. That's kind of like what this felt like. Well, I looked
Interesting.
over, yeah, and looked over to my right, and there was this huge, gigantic wall full of scrolls. My guide took my scroll off the wall and put it on this table. And everybody that was in a lifetime back in 1987 when this happened, they all had scrolls on this wall. So what happens when we pass, we come back to this building, we get our scroll, we open it, and we read through to see if we accomplished the things we had set out to do. That's the whole purpose of it, to see if we accomplished what our goals were. And oh, before I forget, I got to tell you this. When I looked over to my left, I looked to my left in this building, there was this huge sprawling window. And as I looked out the window, there was a walkway on the outside. And there were all these people walking back and forth. Wherever I was on the other side, it was a lot of activity. And there were all these people walking back and forth. And that's when I saw them. They looked just like we do. They all have their own personality. They all have their own look about them. Some people are taller, some people are shorter, and everybody was just walking back and forth. They were all going somewhere. And what it looked like was, you know what it's when you go to a large city and you go out to the street at lunchtime in the middle of the city and you see all these people? That's what this looked like. Well, on the other
Right.
side of the walkway, there was the most beautiful lake I have ever seen. I can't even to this day, I've never seen anything that was as beautiful as this lake. It was round, and all around the outside of the lake were these weeping willow trees. Have you ever seen those weeping willow trees? Their branches come over. The branches came over, and all their leaves
Yes.
were sitting
Yeah.
on the surface of the lake. It was absolutely beautiful. And my guide said, everything that's on earth is also on the other side, meaning all the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the mountains, everything that people love to do here on earth, they can also do on the other side. He told me that if you want to go to music festivals, you can. If you want to take classes, you can. If you want to go to lectures, if you want to just visit with family and friends or go hiking or any of these things, you can do all those things on the other side. And I thought that was incredible because everybody's asking me, well, what do we do over there? What do people do? A lot of times they do the same things we do here, but you do the things out of love, the things that you love to do. So before we leave that building, he takes me to a room that it looked like a gigantic library. And all these books were on these bookshelves, but every single book looked the same. They all had purple or maroon kind of bindings. And there was gold lettering on every one of these books. And the lettering didn't go across. The lettering went down, vertical. So he walks me up to one of these books, and the book that he showed me was called Nina, Nina. And I didn't know what that meant. And he told me everybody has a soulmate. Well, I had never heard that term before. I didn't even know what that meant until much later. But when we were created, God created all of us with a perfect mate. And we have that perfect mate on the other side for eternity. And what these books contain is the books contain everything about that soul when God created it. All their past lifetimes, what they love to do, what gifts they were given at creation, all these things are in that book. And my soulmate's name is Nina. And we all have a soulmate. What I don't know is how often a soulmate comes into a lifetime with us. I don't know, because my first inclination is that they probably don't, because that's one of the things that we learn the most from is when we have relationships with people. If we always had our soulmate with us in every lifetime, we may not learn that much about relationships. So I didn't know. I didn't think to ask him any questions. I wish I had. I have so many questions, Jake, more now than I did then. I have all these questions I would love to ask. So that was a neat part to see this building with the dome. The next building, I think, is my most favorite part of my whole NDE. So he takes me to this building, and this one wasn't made of marble. It looked like it was made of steel, beautiful steel, like what's the thing you can buy refrigerators and ovens? What do they call that? Oh, stainless steel. It looked like stainless steel. It was huge, and it looked like a stadium. It looked like you'd go to see a football game or a soccer game in this building. So he takes me to the inside, and the first thing I remember was that this place was so bright. All the lights were on. It was absolutely bright, and there were thousands of empty seats. It was almost like I was the only person there. And it was a planetarium. Remember when you're a kid, you took field trips to planetariums where they show the stars and planets on the ceiling?
Yeah.
That's where they took me. And there was a gentleman behind me who ran the planetarium. And he spoke to me and he said, "Let's begin." All of a sudden, all the lights went off. It was pitch black. I sat down and he said to me, he said, "When you look at the stars, this is what you see." And what he was talking about was everybody on Earth at that time, which was back in 1987, this is what they see when they look at the stars. And all of a sudden, our sun showed up, our star, and then Mercury and Mars and Venus and Earth and Uranus and Neptune, all of our planets in our solar system. And then it disappeared. And then he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And he was talking about all the people on the other side. This is what they see when they look at the stars. And all of a sudden, planet after planet after planet started showing up. First, it was dozens, then thousands, and then millions of other planets. Some were blue like Earth, others were brown, some were yellow, all these planets. And he said to me, there is far more life in the universe than you can possibly imagine. And I think there were two reasons why my guide showed me this. The first one was to tell me that Earth is not the only inhabited planet, that there are virtually endless other planets with life. And the other reason was to tell me that Earth is not the only planet that we can have lifetimes on. There's virtually endless numbers of planets that we can have lives on. And something that I want to share with your listeners, something that I've learned since I've had my NDE. I have always been a science fiction fan. Do you remember the Star Trek with Captain Kirk? Yeah, I used to watch that every
Yes.
day after school. I would come home from school and I'd watch reruns of the original Star Trek. And I always believed that there has to be other life in the universe. So after my NDE, I started studying astronomy and found out that astronomers estimate that in the Milky Way galaxy, just our galaxy alone, there are 100 billion planets with 400 billion stars. They also think that there are 2 trillion galaxies in the known universe. Well, this is an amazing example I want to share. If we had a spaceship that could travel at the speed of light, which is the fastest speed humanity knows, which is 186,000 miles a second, it would take 99,000 years for that ship to get from one end of the Milky Way to the other. And that's just our galaxy. There are billions of other galaxies. Can you imagine how much life there is in the universe? It just absolutely blows my mind. And yeah, exactly,
It might as well be
exactly. And I
infinite,
was reading
it's so
something
big.
recently. They said that our closest galaxy to the Milky Way is the Andromeda galaxy. It's 2.5 million light years away. That means if we had a ship that could travel at the speed of light, it would take 2.5 million years just to get there.
Hmm.
So the idea, the ramifications of thinking about that are astronomical. And something I read too, you remember Carl Sagan? He said there are more
Yep.
planets in the universe than there are grains of sand on planet Earth. Isn't isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That blows my mind. I think about that quote a lot. When I walk on one beach, if I just had a
exactly.
handful of sand, that blows my mind. And that's on
Yeah,
one beach, but he's saying grains of sand on the
it
planet.
is. I,
So
yeah,
it's
I
like,
can't even
what? It might
I
as
can't
well
even
be
comprehend it.
infinite. It's
So that
amazing.
was that was the planetarium.
Yeah.
This next place he took me to was also really amazing. He takes me to this building. Again, this one is really long. It's so long I can't see the end of it, but it didn't have columns on the side. It just had columns in the front, and it had all these steps leading up to the top. It was kind of like what our Supreme Court building looks like. It's got all the columns up front and all the stairways to walk up to it. So he takes me to the inside, and it's a library. And there's all these bookshelves, probably 20 or 30 feet high, full of books. And my guide said, anything you ever wanted to learn is in this library. So we go to the left hand side. He takes me to the left wall of this library, and there were all these study rooms, kind of like what we have nowadays in a library. We have these different study rooms or group rooms, and each of these rooms was about the size of an average person's living room. And he has me walk up to this one room, and there was a woman sitting there. She had jet black hair down to her waist. She was wearing like a burgundy kind of a gown, and she was watching something on the wall. Well, what we would call it today was a what we would say was a flat screen television mounted on the wall. Well, back in 1987, we didn't have flat screen TVs yet. We had those big, huge boxes that were just extremely wide and really heavy. You couldn't put those on a wall. So I didn't know what she was
Hmm.
watching. It just looked like what we would call like a 50-inch flat screen TV. And she was watching something on the screen. And my guide said, get closer to see what she's watching. So I get closer, and she's watching a battle of Native American Indians on horseback fighting the United States cavalry on horseback. And I thought she must be watching a movie. What else could it be? And my guide said she is watching living history. And my first thought was, how is that possible? Because we didn't have video cameras 200 years ago. How could it possibly be recorded? And my guide said, everything gets recorded. That's how they do the life review. And this is one of the questions that I would like to ask somebody, but I don't understand how our lifetimes are recorded. It's a God thing. It's somehow to do with, it's all about God having this extraordinary ability that our lifetimes are recorded. So when we pass, when we finish our life and go back home, we can go back and watch any aspect of our life. So what this girl was doing in this room, she wanted to learn about a particular time of Earth's history that happened 200 years ago. And she could actually watch what really happened. And I just thought that was extraordinary because I have always liked history. And one thing that we can do when we get back is we can go to this library, we can go to these rooms, and we can watch anything about history. And one of the things I want to do is when I get back, I want to go watch the D-Day, the Normandy invasion that happened in World War II. And just the
Yeah.
idea that you can go over there when your lifetime is finished and you can learn things that you never thought you could see. But everything gets recorded. So everything that's ever happened, you can go and watch that. And I just thought that was just incredible.
Yeah, the first time I heard you talk about that, I had all kinds of
Oh
ideas
my
as to
gosh,
what
yeah.
I would love to watch. Um, I- just the fact that you could get the truth of history, because there's so much fabrication, so much distortion, political agendas, and
Exactly.
actually
Yep,
see
to see what
how
actually
this
happened.
really
Yep,
unfolded. It'd
absolutely.
be amazing.
So
Yeah.
here's the next part.
Yeah.
This was something that was really amazing too. So we leave this library and he takes me to what I would call a castle, like a castle in England or France, and it was made of stone. All these stones looked like a castle you would see in France. And he said, "Let's go inside." So we go inside, and there was the first thing I noticed was this red sprawling carpet all over the floor, and it made you feel like you were royalty. And my guide explained to me that on the other side, if there was anything that you wanted to learn about a time in history, you can go to these places like these castles where they have all these buildings that are on Earth, and you can see what these people lived in. So we go inside, and the first thing I noticed that on each side of these walls are these pictures, these paintings, and what they were paintings, life-size paintings of people who had lived in Europe during this time in these castles. So if you're on the other side, if you wanted to learn about what life was like in medieval Europe, you could go to this castle. You could see these paintings of everybody who lived there, what they looked like, and also how they dressed. And in front of each one of these paintings, there was a podium, and it was right in front of the picture. And on the podium was a book, and the book was about that person's lifetime. So if you were on the other side and you wanted to learn about King George or Queen Anne, you could go to one of these castles, you could see what they looked like, you could read about them in these books. Well, right about then, I looked off to my right, and the castle had a stairwell. Remember how castles have those round stairwells to get from one floor to the next? That's what this castle had. And
Yeah.
there was a woman who was walking down this stairwell. And she walked up to me. And I didn't she was I mean she saw me. She was walking right towards me. And she spoke to me and she said, "Is there anything I can help you find?" And Jake, I said the stupidest thing to her that I could ever have said. I said, "No thanks, I'm just looking." That that's what you say when you're in a clothing store. I could have asked her anything. Who are you? Where
Yeah.
am I thought I was supposed to be having surgery. But my guide said, on the other side, this girl is what we would call like a professor in a university. She loved to study history. So you could come to this castle and ask her any kind of question you might have about that particular era of Earth's history. I thought that was extraordinary because people over there they just do what they really love to do.
I'd always had a question about that. I say always. When I hear your story, I'm wondering why, and maybe you have some insight into this. if you could just go and watch history, why would they present t epics in time in the form of paintings and books? Do you know what I mean? Almost like maybe this is just a soul's preferred way of learning, to look at a painting and read a book when they could just go to those screens and
Yeah,
watch actual history happening. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's a really
why
good
would they have
question,
different
and
flavors of
I'll try
experience
to
like
answer it.
that?
What they were explaining to me was that, at least on this planet, I don't know what it's like on other planets, but on Earth, there are many souls who don't want to come here because this place is perceived as really hard. It's a dark planet. A lot of bad things happen
Hmm.
here, and many of us come here to try to make a difference. Like what you're doing with your podcast, you're going to make a difference with this podcast. And but a lot of people don't want
Well,
to
thank you.
participate here. They don't want to experience this. Experience the loss of a loved one, if you lose a child, if you get a divorce, if you have all these things that happen, it's really hard to live on this planet. And I think the reason that they have all these other ways to learn is so that people can still continue to learn and to grow. The difference is that on the other side, you just don't have the experiential learning. You don't ever get to find out what you're really all about, how strong you really are. When you come into a
Mhm.
lifetime, you can feel that. You learn that. And I think too what's really interesting is the time. There's Time is very different. When people that we love pass, when they pass over, they still miss us. They still grieve for us, just like we do for them. But for them, it's different because a lifetime over there is like 3 or 4 months for them. Whereas for us, we could live like 80 or 90 years here on Earth, and it feels like a long time. But to them, it's not. It's not that long. So there are just many souls who they don't want to come and experience this world. And I think that's why we have a lot of those, like the castle, you can go and learn about what people looked like, how they dressed. But that's a great question. I don't know the whole answer. That's kind of what they told me.
Yeah. Well, and I don't, it doesn't make me question the validity of your experience because down
Yeah,
here there are different modes of learning, different modes of teaching. Like I said, I was in education and you try to adapt and
yeah.
accommodate to it, to the need of the learner. So but that always popped up when I listened to you talk. I'm like, I wonder why they have those types of things. And
So
I'm
is
going to let
there?
you continue because I
So
have
that's
more
okay. Well,
questions that are
I'm
related
almost
to
done.
that, but I don't want to interrupt you too
So
much.
then the next place he takes me. This is the last part of my NDE. He takes me to this beautiful meadow, absolutely beautiful green meadow with rolling hills and wild grass and wildflowers. And it was a beautiful sunny day. And then he leaves. My guide leaves, and I'm standing where I thought I was in this meadow by myself. So I turned around to look at the rest of the meadow, and there was a gentleman standing right in front of me. He had a white robe on with a golden sash, and he had gold colored sandals that laced up his calves. And this was the entity we know as Jesus. And I don't know how I knew that. I just knew that this was Jesus. And he spoke to me and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And the very second he said that, it was like, boom, I woke right back up in the hospital. And that was the end of my NDE. It was that's how it ended. And so all these years I have just tried to do what he told me to do, to tell people that there is no death. And I think that they gave me the ability to have total memory, have total recall, because I'm able to share everything that happened in good detail so people know and people aren't afraid of passing. Because if there's one thing I could share with your audience that I want them to take away, is the knowledge that the happiest day of your life is going to be your last, because that's the day you get to go home. But our culture
Yeah.
doesn't teach that. Everybody's afraid to die. but that's how we get home again. And something else that's really neat too is that nobody ever dies alone. The other side always sends somebody to get us. Nobody ever passes alone. So all the people that lost loved ones because of the pandemic, where they thought they couldn't see them, they don't have to feel guilty because somebody was there to get them. And I think that's my most important
Mm.
message, is that death is nothing to be afraid of. That's how we get back home, and that's how God set it up.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm honored to be a part of this mission that you were given.
Oh yeah,
That's
you're right.
great that
Yeah.
Jesus was the closer of the experience. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, before we,
Yeah.
before we
That's I
go,
never
give him
yeah,
this.
I
And
never
that
thought about
is
that. He was the
profound.
closer. You're right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that first of all, that it's Jesus saying to you that the most
Yes.
important message he's giving to you is tell them there is no death. Because if that truly were to sink in, how differently would we live if we
Oh,
truly
you're right. You're
internalized
absolutely
that
right.
and believed it
Yeah.
and felt it, you know? So that
It could actually
that
change. It could
really
change the
that makes
world.
perfect sense to me. Um, yeah, for sure. And that's why I became so obsessed with near-death experiences. I would tell people about my friends about it, and like, oh, that sounds morbid. You know what? You're obsessed with death. No, it
Exactly.
helped the way I live. It gave me
Exactly.
hope. I'm obsessed with feeling hopeful. Is why I would read them. And yours is one of the more hopeful ones, more beautiful ones, and very unique for those listeners who haven't dove into the near-death experience material, the greater mass of material. John's is unique because they're not, a lot of times they're more personal. They're more geared toward the person's personal experience and needs, and they're not describing such a, honestly, an earth-like realm. And let's start there, because so many other experiences aren't so relatable and similar to how things are here on Earth. Do you get I guess, the sense that that is a realm that is intended to just look so much like Earth, because it is, like you say, maybe the entire thing is an orientation experience. I know that there were buildings where people get oriented, but it's like, it sounds like you're describing a world where new souls cross over in order to lessen the shock of passing on. So you have the orientation building, but the whole experience itself is to help orient a soul that's newly passed over. Did you get any
What
sense of
I
that at
what
all?
I did get is that when the other side was created by God, Earth, the whole idea of having lifetimes, I don't think was a part of that yet. Nobody explained that to me. It's just kind of what I got, that the other side was kind of like the model that everything else was built from. Like everything that's on Earth now was
Hmm.
already on the other side first. And that's kind of like the best way that I can describe it. It's That's home. That's where everything starts. That's where the whole idea of coming into lifetimes started. And I think part of that is, at creation, God gave all of us a couple things. The first one was free will. We all have free will. Some people choose the light path, and other people choose the dark path, but free will is theirs. And He also, I think, created us with this desire to always want to learn and to grow and develop, because we all like to learn new things. Well, that happens to our souls on the other side also. We still like to learn. And so this whole idea of having other planets that we could come to was birthed from that idea of wanting to give us the ability to always learn and to grow. And what's interesting too is that
Hmm.
nobody is forced to come into a lifetime. It's totally up to the soul. There are some souls who like to have thousands of lives, and there are others who don't. It's just totally, it's like whether you want to get a PhD or whether you just want to get a bachelor's or not go to college at all. It's totally up to the soul. And I thought that was just something that was extraordinary to learn about too.
Yeah, it is amazing to think about. And the reason I ask that is because, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, this isn't the only planet to incarnate on. So let's say you incarnate on another planet where there aren't even there's nothing even similar to how Earth has evolved. Would
You know
their
what?
other
I have
side
wondered
look like
about
their
that ever
planet?
since,
You
and
see what I
I don't
mean?
know the answer. I wish I did. I don't know if
Hmm.
wherever this orientation building
Yeah.
was, I don't know if that's for all the planets or if that's just for Earth. So do all those other planets have their own other side, or is there just one? That I don't know. I have no idea.
Hmm. Well, it reminds me, your experience reminds me of I'll call it an
Oh yeah,
experience or a
yeah.
scene out of Robert
Out of body
Monroe's books. Are
experience.
you familiar with Robert Monroe or his books? Okay. Yes, he had a part in his book where he was in what he described as this beautiful park and talked about all the different types of wildlife and plant life in the park and wondered how there were tropical birds next to, say snowy owls and pine trees next to palm trees. And what he was describing in this park was that souls would come there and they would create or
Oh,
place their favorite things from the planet in the park. So all the souls created the park. But the park was an orientation center. I don't know if he used that phrase, but he said it was where souls go initially to get over the shock of passing on. So it made me think that he's like, it wasn't actually something where you'd stay, but it's where you'd go initially to get oriented
oh,
to this different frequency or realm. He hesitated to call
yeah,
anything, say, heaven or angels or anything like that. In fact, he met light beings that he called inspecs. It was short for intelligent species. So he just called it an inspec. And it makes me think of that when I hear your story, that I'm just wondering, is this a realm you go to that of course is going to be temporary, because I would imagine everything's
yeah.
temporary throughout eternity. Everything's always morphing and changing as you expand as a soul. Um, but I guess my point is it just makes me think that. Because also, yeah, if there are other planets to incarnate on, would their other
That's a
side
really
look like their
interesting
planet
question.
and
I don't
so
know.
forth? But
When I
mhm. even if even if that was the
Yeah,
ultimate heaven, it would
yeah,
be
I know.
fantastic. It would be a great place to be, it
You know
sounds
what's so
like.
interesting too about
I
that is
had a
that
question.
on the other side, when you're there, the most extraordinary thing was that you can feel how much God loves and cherishes every single one of us. It's the
Yeah.
most I have never felt anything like that. It's kind of like the love that parents have for their own kids, but like a thousand times more. And when you're here on Earth, we don't feel that. On Earth, it's almost like you are in a battle and you're in a foxhole without a radio. You feel cut off. That's kind of how it feels. And I went through a horrible, it must have lasted at least 2 months of this horrible depression after I had this experience because I was like,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to live here knowing what it's like over there? I didn't want to stay. I even thought about suicide. And then I realized that what Jesus told me in that meadow is what I'm supposed to do with my life. I'm supposed to tell people because you know what it was like is he didn't say, "You know what, John, when you have time, when it's convenient for you, when you're available, would you mind sharing this with people?" He didn't say it like that. He said, "You must tell them there is no death." And it was the way he said it. It was like, "Okay, this is what I'm supposed to do to share this with anybody who will listen."
Yeah. So and I've thought this
Oh
before,
yeah, yeah,
you got a gift and a curse. It's a double-edged sword. That depression you're describing, I felt that same thing for years. And when you talk about how you can feel God's love over there, I think about that all the time. The fact that I don't often feel that, not just the connection with God's love, but to really anything. When I think about how I was when I was a child,
yeah.
I was connected to the moment, I guess you'd say. I was living presently in the moment. And now we're so caught up with things that we must do. And, when you're raising kids and have careers, you have to plan for things and think ahead. And then you get caught up and all that stuff. And it's like, I don't really feel connected to anything except maybe the feeling of anxiety sometimes. And it's when you described that, feeling
Yeah,
God's love. I'm just like, oh,
it
I
does.
just,
It's the most
that just
incredible
sounds
thing
so
I've ever
great.
felt.
Um, yeah. hmm I have some questions. I was writing them down actually as you were talking. Your guide, Alan, when he said, "I'm your guide, Alan," was there any kind of recognition there at all? Like,
No,
oh
not.
yeah, I
It
know
was.
Alan,
It
or
wasn't a
was it just like a
stranger
stranger?
because it felt very familiar. Because I remember thinking, "This is home. This is home," but I didn't have my whole memory back, and I think the reason was because everything was happening so quickly. We were going here, then here, then here, and he was telling
Mm,
me everything in my ear. So I never stopped. I never stopped to think, what is going on? What's happening? It just I was just going along with everything he was telling me and looking at everything he was saying. But it felt familiar somehow. It felt like this is that feeling that I felt all my life that there's got to be something more. This earth plane that we're living on, this can't just be all there is.
yeah,
Where are we from? What is this all for? Why do all these things happen? And it was more like I remember this. This is where we're from. But yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. But I didn't have my whole full memory that we have when we're actually over
mm.
there.
And that makes sense to me because, like you said, you already, when you came back, had a bout of deep depression. If you were to get all that memory
Yeah,
back and remember, oh, Alan, you know how deep your relationships are with all these people, was probably would probably be too hard to be back here. And that's why a lot of people ask that too. It's like, well, if we had past lives, why don't we remember them? Or, if we have life in
yeah.
between lives, why don't we remember any of that? Well, because
I, I,
one of the reasons would it be too
I
hard to
think you're
be
right.
here,
Yeah, because
to
we
have
we
a
come
memory
here
of
with
something
we have our own
else.
goals for coming here. Everybody has a
Yeah.
reason for being here, and I think if we remembered everything about the other side, we wouldn't want to stay here. Who would ever want to go to come into an
Yeah.
experience to know what it's like to lose a child? That's just nobody would want to do that. But on the
Yeah.
other side, we actually do plan those things to learn. But when you're here, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go
Yeah.
through this. And I think all of us, when you look back at your life, you look at all the horrible things you survived, you've become even more just by having gone through that. And people would ask me, would you ever want to be who you were before those experiences? And I say no, because those are the things that taught me the most. And that's how we tend to
Yeah.
learn the most is when we go through something
Yeah.
difficult.
And that's what I'm getting the feeling from reading and listening to experiences like yours, that the entirety of the experience of Earth is one of those things where that's where I learned the most. As a soul, those Earth experience, those Earth
Exactly.
lives are where I really expanded the most. It just anymore to me makes so much perfect sense. I mean, absolute perfection. Like the life review, you're saying it's the perfect teacher. It is the perfect teacher. It's perfect justice. People are like, why does it seem like all these it's the evil people that are successful
Yeah.
in the world, the billionaires, the ones with all the power, all the money.
That's
Why do they
true.
get away with this? Well, nobody gets away with anything. They will
Abs-
have to feel what they've
that is
done
exactly correct.
and experience
Nothing
it
is hidden
directly.
from God. Nothing.
Yeah, right. So it just makes so much sense. Your past lives that you saw
Yeah.
as the monk, as
The
the
fisherman.
shoemaker,
Yeah.
and what was the other one that the fisherman? When you saw those, were there any
No,
echoes of
all I knew was
recognition
that
there, of
those
memory?
the
Or
those people that I was watching, that was me. And it didn't look anything like I look now. Every one of those lives, I look different, but I didn't have anything
yeah,
like, oh yeah, I remember that life. And I think it was because everything was just going too quickly. Everything was just moving so fast that I
yeah,
didn't have time to really digest it until the whole experience was over, and I had a couple of weeks to really think about what had happened. Because I didn't know that I had died during that whole experience. I didn't know what happened. My first thought when I woke up in that building, there was the orientation center, the huge long one. My first thought was, oh my gosh,
hmm
I had no idea the hospital was this big. I didn't know what happened until after I got back. I didn't know. I think if I had known, I would have asked so many more questions. But back in 1987, the whole term near death experience wasn't even invented yet. I'd never heard the word spirit guide. I'd never heard the word soulmate. I'd never heard of any of these
Hmm.
terms before.
Yeah. And that's interesting that then someone like you, with your experience or lack of experience, was one who was chosen to have it and
Yeah,
come back and say, "Hey, tell people about this."
yeah,
Like you had a clean slate, I guess, and you could perceive it with such innocent eyes, I guess you'd say. You weren't clouded by reading any material
yeah.
or seeing or hearing any of this.
That's
This
true.
all
That's a
came
really
to you
good point. You're
fresh. I
right.
just find
Yeah,
that interesting.
exactly.
Mhm. So you kind of already answered my other questions then, because it was about how much you connected or recognized things like the past lives. And then I was going to bring up Nina. Did you, there was
Yeah,
probably no memory
no
of like,
memory at
oh
all.
yeah, Nina,
Yeah,
how could I
no.
have forgotten Nina? Nothing like that. And I hadn't gotten before listening to you how you describe how quick it was. Kind of like, I can imagine like in a dream,
Yeah,
because in dreams, the scene kind of switches
exactly.
too. It's like,
Yeah,
what
in
was
fact,
that?
my
So it was kind
initial
of like
thought
that.
was this had to be some kind of a dream or some kind of a hallucination. And then I realized that I don't normally remember my dreams. Even to this day, I still don't remember my dreams. And it wasn't a hallucination
Hmm.
because I wasn't here anymore. I actually passed. And in a million years, I could never have thought up what they showed me. I would never have imagined that that's
Yeah.
real, that any of that's really there, because we think that our world is the only world, that this is the physical world, this is all that there is. I can't explain how everything that I saw is there, because we think in terms of our what we know about physics. That's not possible. There can't be other buildings when a person dies. Where are they? What is the place that this is occurring in? And I can't explain it. All I know is that I saw it. Everything that I saw, I touched. It was real. It was just like if we touched a table or a chair. It felt just like that. Somehow it's more real
Yeah.
than anything I've ever experienced here. And I have no idea how to explain that.
It always makes me wonder, because yours isn't the only one like this. I have heard of other afterlife experiences where they are
Oh,
describing
good.
worlds and buildings and people doing things. I mean, having quote unquote jobs, but things that they love to do. And I always wondered, why would they need physical books and physical buildings? I mean, we have buildings to protect our bodies. You've got that, of course, and sometimes to organize and store things. But if information could come to you, let's just say
Yeah,
through a
yeah.
screen,
I don't
why
know.
would they even have books? Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
and not just books, but whole buildings full of books. It's almost like they it's a symbol in a sense, something you'd recognize. But I'm like, is it just
yeah.
because it's beautiful? It's just a beautiful thing. Books can be very beautiful and artistic, the binding and everything, and just to see rows of books, it's like, is it just because something or enough of us as souls prefer to see those types of things that they're just there for the sake of being there? Or they could have presented this in any way they
I
wanted
think
to,
you're
but
right,
they
because
kept
that's
it
a
for
great
the
point. Yeah,
aesthetic,
because
I
when I was in
guess.
that library,
And
there were people everywhere. There were people visiting. There were people studying. There were people looking for books.
hmm.
It was so full of activity. People were everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a yeah, that's a really good point. It
Humans
could
just
just be
like
because of
it.
the aesthetics of it. Yeah,
I would enjoy it. I've always wondered too, because I'm like, I don't want to just
yeah.
be floating
How
around
for,
in
how
clouds. I
boring
mean,
would that
you
be?
know what I mean? Like airy fairy, right? You
Yeah.
want some context. You like music festivals, like you said. Oh, I had a question, and it's very
No, I
mundane,
didn't see
but
that. I
was
didn't see
anybody
any
eating?
restaurants or
Could you?
food. But what's interesting is that
Oh,
my guide
really?
said everything you like to do here, you can also do over there. And I just took I guess
Yes.
I didn't think to ask any questions, but people have asked me that, like, do we have to eat? All I know for sure is we don't have to sleep. The soul doesn't have to sleep like we do. And
Hmm.
I don't think, right, we don't have to eat like we do here to stay alive for calories. Somehow our bodies over there don't need that. But I think we still can, because it's something that so many of us enjoy. We enjoy eating. So I just take it as, yeah, there is some
Yeah.
way to do that. Yeah.
That was my hope. Because I've heard people describe, there are certain some of the reasons for becoming physical was over there without physicality, you don't get to enjoy the
Yeah.
carnal, sensual pleasures of having a body. No sexual activity, no eating. That's something that makes this experience special and rich and great. And that makes sense to me. But I'm like, still,
Yeah.
surely they could arrange something to where we could have the experience, at least the experience of eating over
And
there
have my
too. Why
morning
not?
coffee.
So I just wondered about that, which is, I know it sounds mundane, but that's one of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite things about being human is eating, music, and things like that. Yeah, just the little things. They really are the spice of life. And it was at that point in the interview that we lost signal, or it got so bad that I didn't feel that I could use it in the episode. Shortly after that, though, I asked John what I ask all my guests: what gives you hope in this day and age, and what message can you leave the audience with that may give them hope? And he referred to something that he mentioned before in his experience, is that on the other side, we have so many other people, he referred to them as people, so many other souls rooting for us, so many other souls who understand what it means to come down to this planet and become a human, that we should keep that in mind in the times that seem to be dark and difficult. It was never not supposed to have darkness and difficulty in it, this life. He said to not let the dark times um, keep us from realizing our potential, in the sense that you never know which acts that you commit in this world are going to be the ones that are going to be considered valuable and profound on the other side. So I guess to be safe, just make them acts of kindness, acts of love, acts of service. Sometimes those acts need to be love for yourself, service to yourself, things like that. But that you will be, when you cross over, extremely proud of what you've accomplished. As much as a lot of times we feel while we are down here in this dimension that we're not worthy of much, once we leave this place and get that fresh perspective, the perspective of what's valuable to the soul, he said we're going to be unimaginably proud of what we've done. So, again, I'm sorry that the interview had to end this way. And John, again, I'm sorry that it wasn't you saying this, because I'm sure you could have said it better. But thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.